The king fell for a humble florist at first sight. With the power of the entire kingdom at his command, he asked for her hand, confident she could never refuse.
Marry me, and I will give you everything.
But then, something happened. She rejected him.
I will not marry you, my king. I reject you.
Without hesitation, in front of everyone. Shock rippled through the palace. Shock shook the entire kingdom. Now he faces a choice.
Seek the truth behind her refusal, or accept it. Which decision should I make?
A love that defied power. A kingdom turned upside down. The story that stunned the realm begins now.
The great hall shimmered under 1,000 candles, golden light dancing across marble columns and velvet banners embroidered with the royal crest. Nobles in jeweled gowns whispered behind gloved hands, their voices sharp with speculation. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of peace. Yet the air was tight, charged with something unsaid. At the far end of the hall, atop the white stone dais, King Aldrin Valerius Thornwall stood in full ceremonial armor, crowned and powerful. But his expression was different. Not cold like the rumors claimed. Not ruthless like the council whispered. No, tonight his eyes carried something dangerously human. He raised a hand. The music stopped. The crowd froze. Aldrin stepped forward, the silver wolf sigil of his royal house gleaming against his chestplate. Tonight, he began, voice smooth and deep, I will do what no king before me has done. Confusion rippled through the room. Whispers fractured the silence. Aldrin turned, not to the nobles, not to the council members in black and gold, but to the far end of the hall where a single commoner stood. A young woman in a simple blue dress. Fingers stained by flowers. Back straight as steel. Alara Winrose. Her breath hitched as every gaze in the kingdom landed on her. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Some watched with disgust. Some with pity. Some with fear. Aldrin descended the steps, each footfall echoing like a hammer against stone. He stopped before her. Time held its breath. Alara, he said softly, yet everyone heard. You once told me that a man's worth is measured not by his crown, but by his choices. A murmur spread. Nobles leaned forward. Aldrin lowered himself to one knee. Gasps exploded through the hall. Then let this be my choice, he said. Not as king, but as a man. I offer you not just my hand. He glanced up, eyes locked with hers. But my heart. Marry me, Alara Winrose. The hall erupted, shouts, fury, disbelief. Jewels fell. Wine spilled. A duchess fainted. A king had just proposed to a florist. And somewhere deep inside Alara's chest, a truth tightened like a secret burning to escape. Silence fell so heavy over the great hall it seemed to crush the air itself. Every eye was locked on Alara, waiting, no, demanding, her response. She stood frozen, surrounded not by people, but by judgment, expectation, and danger disguised as silk and diamonds. King Aldrin was still on one knee before her, holding out a ring forged of Valyrian moonstone and royal gold, a priceless symbol of union. But she didn't look at the ring. She looked at him. His expression was sincere, vulnerable, something no one had ever seen from the Iron Wolf of Thornwall. Alara, he whispered, only for her, but everyone heard it anyway. Say you'll stand with me. Her heartbeat thundered. Her throat tightened. She could feel the walls closing around her. The council watching like hawks, nobles sharpening invisible knives, the people of the court waiting to crown her or crucify her. If she said yes, she would doom them both. If she said no, Alara, Aldrin said again, voice raw now, pleading. Her lips parted. A single breath escaped her. The decision tore like glass inside her chest. I can't. The two words struck harder than a war horn. A wave of shock crashed through the hall. You what? Hissed Lady Meridia, a viper among the nobles. She refuses the king? Arrest her. She dares humiliate the crown? Aldrin rose slowly, disbelief clouding his face. You refuse me? Alara's voice trembled, but her resolve did not. I cannot marry a king. Gasps. Outrage. A goblet shattered somewhere. A councilman stepped forward. Girl, do you understand what you're saying? Alara raised her chin. Perfectly. Aldrin's gaze searched hers, desperate for an answer. Why? Tell me why. Her fingers curled into fists. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell him everything. But if she did, the kingdom would burn. So she buried the truth and spoke the lie that would save him. Because I do not love you. The hall detonated in chaos. Aldrin flinched like she had struck him in the heart. Alara turned, hiding tears, hiding truth, and walked away as the world erupted behind her. The sun rose over Winrose village, spilling golden light across cobblestone streets slick with morning dew. The market was alive with the clatter of wooden carts, the calls of merchants, and the laughter of children chasing chickens. Among the bustle, a young woman moved with quiet purpose, her hands stained with soil and petals. Alara Winrose carried a wicker basket brimming with blossoms, lilacs, daisies, and rare bluebells she had nurtured since dawn. She offered flowers to every passerby, her smile warm and patient, even when the villagers barely noticed her. "Good morning, mother," she said, ducking into a small stone cottage. Inside, the air smelled faintly of herbs and medicine. Her mother lay wrapped in a woolen blanket, pale but smiling. "Alara," her mother rasped, "you worry too much about others." Alara knelt beside her, arranging a small bouquet on the bedside table. "And you worry too much about me." Her mother chuckled weakly, then coughed. Alara pressed a hand to her shoulder. "I'll fetch the herbs today. Don't fret." Outside, she sold her flowers in the market square, weaving through the crowd with careful grace. She offered blossoms to children, helped an elderly man gather fallen apples, and smiled at a beggar with a nod of recognition. Her kindness wasn't performative, it was instinct, a reflection of every hardship she had endured. By midday the sun beat down hard. Her hands were scratched, her skirts smudged with mud, but her heart remained light. Every coin she earned went to medicine for her mother, or seeds for next season. No one in the village knew the secret she carried, a quiet, unyielding strength forged from grief, responsibility, and hope. As the bell above the chapel rang, she paused, gazing toward the horizon, unaware that far beyond the fields, the eyes of a king had begun to take notice of her small, unwavering world. The throne room of Thornwall Castle was vast, echoing with the soft shuffle of armored guards and the distant clink of chains from the dungeons below. At the center, on a dais of black marble, sat King Aldrin Valerius Thornwall, draped in a cloak of deep crimson, trimmed with fur. His posture was perfect, regal, a statue carved from power and discipline, but the sharp angles of his jaw hinted at sleepless nights, at battles fought both on the field and in his mind. Advisors bowed, their voices low and cautious. "Your Majesty, the northern provinces report unrest. Crops are failing, and the people demand aid," said a gray-haired councilman, trembling at the king's gaze. Aldrin's eyes, a cold steel gray, scanned the maps spread across the ebony table. He spoke softly, yet every word carried weight, resonating through the hall. "Aid is necessary, but not at the cost of the treasury. The kingdom survives only if we survive first." A silence followed. The council dared not argue. War had taken its toll, families broken, villages burned, alliances shattered. Aldrin's decisions had saved some, condemned others, and every choice left a scar. A guard approached, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, the southern merchants demand an audience. They threaten to withhold grain unless taxes are lowered." Aldrin's fingers brushed a silver dagger at his belt, a habit from the battlefield. "Let them wait," he said, voice firm but weary. "A kingdom cannot bow to threats while its own people starve." Even in his solitude, the king bore the weight of every life under his rule. His reputation commanded respect, but it also kept him distant, feared, untouchable. Few knew the man beneath the armor, the man haunted by ghosts of wars past, carrying the silent burden of every life lost on the road to the throne. Outside the castle walls, the wind whispered through the battlements, carrying rumors, fear, and the faintest hint of hope. A hope that one day, the Iron Wolf might learn to trust his heart as fiercely as he commanded his kingdom. The early morning mist clung to Winrose village, softening the edges of the cobblestones and rooftops. A lone figure moved among the stalls, cloaked and hooded, blending with the merchants and villagers. King Aldrin had set aside his armor and crown, disguising himself as a common traveler, though the steel in his posture betrayed him. He watched the market unfold with quiet scrutiny. Children ran past, laughing and squealing. Merchants haggled over herbs, grains, and pottery. And then he saw her, Alara Winrose, kneeling beside a small wooden stall, arranging her fresh flowers with deliberate care. The bluebells caught the sunlight, glowing like tiny lanterns. Something about the way she worked, gentle, precise, unpretentious, drew his attention. She wasn't concerned with wealth, titles, or even the stares of the villagers. She was entirely herself, utterly human. Aldrin stepped closer, careful not to draw notice, his cloak hiding the gold trim of his boots. He watched as she offered a bloom to a little girl, who shyly accepted it, her eyes wide with wonder. "She has courage," he muttered to himself, almost unheard, "and kindness. Both rare, especially here." He lingered near the fountain, noticing the way Alara paused when a cart overturned, immediately rushing to help. Her hands, stained with soil and petals, worked swiftly. Her voice was soft but firm, commanding respect without authority. For the first time in years, Aldrin felt a spark of curiosity, not as a king surveying his people, but as a man observing someone wholly real. He could sense a strength in her that matched, perhaps even challenged, his own, a light in the shadows of the court he had never known. As the villagers continued their daily rhythms, he realized that this brief glimpse of her world might change more than a single morning. It might change him. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of flowers from Alara's baskets. She was arranging bluebells along the edge of the market stall when a sudden shadow fell over her. 3 armored royal soldiers stepped forward, their polished breastplates gleaming. The villagers froze, sensing authority and danger. "Alara Winrose?" one of them asked, voice deep and commanding. She looked up, startled. "Yes. You are required at Thornwall Castle." "Immediately," another said. No explanation, no apology. The edge in their tone left no room for negotiation. Castle?" Alara's voice faltered. She glanced at the market around her, her mother waiting at home, the herbs to tend, the flowers to sell. I cannot leave." The soldiers exchanged a look, impatience flickering across their faces. "It is by royal order. You have no choice." A hush fell over the square. Villagers whispered, speculating. Some feared punishment for defiance. Others muttered about the king's whims. Alara's heart pounded. Her mind raced. Why me? She had tended flowers, helped neighbors, cared for her mother. She had done nothing to attract royal attention. Or so she thought. "Very well," she said, swallowing her fear. She gathered her basket, tying it tightly to her arm, and followed the soldiers. Each step toward the castle echoed like a drumbeat, loud enough to drown the world she knew. Inside her, a strange mixture of dread and curiosity stirred. She sensed that this summons was more than a task. It was a turning point, though she couldn't know why. Behind the cold armor and polished steel, someone waited. A king whose gaze had lingered longer than courtesy demanded, a man who had noticed her in ways no one else ever did. By the time they passed the outer gates, Alara's village was nothing more than a patchwork of rooftops and smoke, fading into memory. The castle loomed ahead, vast and imposing, and with it, the invisible chains of duty, desire, and danger. The massive gates of Thornwall Castle groaned as they swung open, revealing a courtyard lined with guards and statues of past kings. Alara's eyes widened at the scale of it all: marble floors, vaulted ceilings, tapestries that told the kingdom's history in gold thread. The air smelled faintly of incense and cold stone. A steward approached, bowing low. "Welcome, Miss Winrose. You will serve in the royal gardens." His smile was polite, but his eyes held the faintest edge, as if measuring her worth. Alara followed silently, clutching her basket of flowers, her heart pounding. Every step echoed across polished stone, a reminder that she was not in a village anymore. She was in a world ruled by unspoken rules and invisible chains. In the main hall, nobles in velvet and silk whispered behind fans and jeweled hands. Eyes flicked toward her, sharp and assessing. "She is the girl from the market?" a duchess whispered, voice sharp as a knife. "Did the king summon a commoner?" another murmured. Alara felt the weight of every gaze. They were polite, yes, but beneath the surface lurked judgment and disdain. The whispers wrapped around her like ivy, tight and suffocating. A courtier cleared his throat. "The girl will learn quickly. The king's attention is rare." Alara's cheeks warmed, though not from embarrassment. She understood immediately. This was a chessboard, and every person she met was a piece moving in invisible, complex patterns. One false step could ruin her, or worse, draw dangerous notice. She glanced at the garden door ahead, the place she was to work. Rows of exotic plants and meticulously trimmed hedges promised refuge. Yet even there, the castle's power reached. Guards patrolled, shadows lingered, and every whispered glance reminded her. She was both a guest and a target. As she stepped into the first garden, Alara drew a deep breath. She had survived the village. She would survive here. But in the back of her mind, a single thought echoed. I am no ordinary gardener. And this castle, it will demand everything from me. The massive gates of Thornwall Castle closed behind Alara with a resonant clang, cutting off the familiar sounds of her village. She paused in the courtyard, overwhelmed by marble statues of past kings, towering battlements, and the sharp scent of incense and polished stone. Every step on the flagstone echoed through the hallways, a reminder that she was now in a realm ruled by rules she had never known. A steward approached, bowing so low his head nearly touched the floor. "Miss Winrose, the king has assigned you to the royal gardens. You will receive guidance from the head gardener." His tone was polite, but his eyes carried the cold calculation of one used to measuring newcomers. Alara's fingers clenched around the basket of flowers. She nodded, stepping forward, aware of the stairs that followed her down the long corridor. Nobles in velvet and silk whispered behind fans, jeweled hands fluttering like caged birds. "She dares enter the court?" hissed a duchess, eyes narrowing. "A commoner? The king must be mad," muttered a councilwoman. Alara felt the weight of every gaze, every whispered word. The politeness was a mask. Beneath it lay suspicion, jealousy, and a subtle threat she had never encountered in her village. Every glance was a test, every polite nod a challenge she had to navigate. She reached the edge of the garden, where trimmed hedges and rare blooms created a sanctuary. But even here, shadows lingered. Guards paced the paths, and the nobles' whispers seemed to echo even among the flowers. Taking a deep breath, Alara straightened her back. She had survived hard days in the village, tending to her sick mother and coaxing life from stubborn soil. This new world was larger, colder, and more dangerous, but she would endure. A single thought pressed in her mind, sharp as the morning frost. "I am no ordinary gardener. And in this castle, one misstep could cost everything." The garden was quiet, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves and the distant clatter of guards' boots on stone. Alara knelt among the flower beds, fingers stained with soil as she adjusted a row of delicate violets. A voice cut through the morning air, smooth and measured. "You tend the flowers as if they are your only companions." Alara looked up sharply. A man stood at the edge of the garden path, tall, cloaked in the subtle finery of royalty. Even without a crown visible, he carried the weight of command in every straight line of his posture. "I suppose they are better company than most," she replied coolly, brushing dirt from her hands. He smiled faintly, a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "I am told you are Alara Winrose, the girl from the village market." "I am," she said, standing and meeting his gaze evenly. "And you are?" "King Aldrin," he said, letting the title hang lightly, not as a threat but as fact. Alara's eyes narrowed. She had heard of him, of his iron rule, of the way the kingdom bent under his decisions. Yet here he stood, watching her not with disdain, but with interest. "You seem unimpressed," he observed, his voice calm but probing. "I am unimpressed," she said, tone crisp. "Titles and gold mean nothing to me. And I do not fear men who rule from their thrones." A flicker of admiration crossed his face, quickly masked. Few speak so boldly to kings. Most bow, mutter, or hide their thoughts behind polite smiles. Alara's jaw tightened. "I am not like most." For a moment, they simply regarded each other. He saw intelligence and quiet strength behind her wary eyes. She saw authority and danger, the weight of power in every measured breath he took. And yet, for all the intrigue and curiosity sparked between them, her resolve remained. She would trust no man simply because of a crown. "Then perhaps we are both dangerous in our own way," he said softly. She said nothing, returning to her flowers, leaving a subtle challenge in the stillness between them. A silent duel that would shape everything to come. The morning mist still clung to the garden as Aldrin returned, this time unannounced, carrying a simple satchel. Alara glanced up from pruning a row of roses, noting the way the sunlight caught the edges of his cloak, softening the sharp lines of his face. "You returned," she said cautiously, trowel in hand. "I thought I might learn something," he replied, voice gentle, almost hesitant. "About patience and flowers." She raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at her lips. "And what does a king know of patience?" He shrugged, stepping closer, careful not to tread on the blooms. "More than I would like. But perhaps you can teach me." Alara hesitated, then showed him a fragile bluebell, bending slightly under the morning dew. "See this? It's delicate, but it survives frost, wind, neglect. It doesn't ask for praise or gold. It just grows." Aldrin knelt beside her, watching the flower sway under her gentle touch. "Resilient," he murmured. "Like you." Alara's heart quickened, but she kept her gaze steady. Resilience is survival. Not everyone survives as gracefully. He chuckled softly, a sound she hadn't expected from a king. "I think you misunderstand me. I don't merely observe beauty to admire it. I want to understand it. How it thrives despite the harshest conditions. Much like your hands coaxing life from the soil." She paused, considering his words. Perhaps, if you look closely enough, even the smallest things can teach lessons the court cannot. A flicker of warmth crossed his face, quickly hidden behind his usual composure. Then I will follow your lesson if you permit it. For the first time, a tentative bridge formed between them, a silent acknowledgement that beneath the weight of crowns and obligations, two very different worlds could meet. Alara saw the man behind the title, a king capable of curiosity, humility, and even wonder. Aldrin saw the woman beyond the commoner, fierce, intelligent, and quietly commanding respect. The garden became a refuge, a place where authority and humility coexisted, where power softened under the guidance of patience, and where two hearts began to notice one another. Not as king and subject, but as people capable of seeing, truly seeing each other. Alara's hands trembled as she unfolded the brittle, ash-stained letters she had found hidden behind a loose stone in the castle's old library. The ink was faded, the handwriting hurried, but the words screamed a truth she had tried to bury. The village of Winrose has been razed. Survivors are few. By royal decree. Her stomach dropped. Smoke screams soldiers her childhood home, her neighbors, her father gone. All destroyed. She sank to the floor, the letters slipping from her hands, and images she had suppressed for years clawed their way to the surface. The fire consuming the cottages, her mother's screams, the smell of charred wood, the sight of familiar faces lying broken. Her mind raced. How could it be? She had survived, yes, but at what cost? And now, standing in the very castle of the man who commanded those soldiers, the truth burned like molten iron in her chest. Aldrin appeared at the doorway, his presence quiet but deliberate. Alara, I did not mean. She whipped around, fury and grief flaring in her eyes. You didn't mean? Her voice was sharp, shaking. Your soldiers burned my village. My family, my home. He raised his hands, startled, voice steady but cautious. I did not give the order myself. You didn't give the order? She spat, stepping forward, shaking with rage. And yet it happened because of you. Because of your throne, your army, your decisions. Aldrin flinched, guilt flickering across his face, quickly masked by his usual composure. Alara, you, she whispered, voice breaking. I trusted you. I thought you might be different. Her hands clenched the edges of the table, flowers and letters tumbling to the floor. I hated what this castle does to people like me, and now I see it comes from you. The room was silent, the weight of her words pressing against the walls like a physical force. For the first time, Aldrin's carefully measured authority faltered. He saw the fire in her eyes, the righteous indignation, the pain, and knew he could not explain away the past, only hope to repair the present. Alara turned abruptly, storming from the library before he could say another word. The letters fluttered behind her like dying birds, and with each step, the gulf between them grew. A bond had begun, yes, but now it was fractured, poisoned by the shadow of blood and fire she had endured. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the castle council chamber, casting long, golden beams across polished stone floors. Aldrin stood near the center, leaning over maps strewn with markers of villages, roads, and borders. His face was tense, lines carved by years of war and impossible decisions. Alara, he began softly, aware of her presence but giving her the space to respond. I understand your anger. And it is justified. She remained by the doorway, arms crossed, gaze sharp. Justified, she repeated. Your soldiers razed my home. I watched smoke where my village once stood. How is that just? He straightened, voice steady but carrying the weight of truth. The order came from the council, not me. I tried to intervene, sent messages, delayed actions, but the wheels of war move faster than even kings can control. Alara's eyes narrowed. So you're a victim of your own throne? A king trapped in golden politics. I am not excusing what happened, Aldrin said, stepping closer. I take responsibility for every life lost under my rule, even when it wasn't by my hand. That is the burden of being king. She shook her head, conflicted. A king is supposed to protect, not destroy. Can one man carry a crown and still remain human? He met her gaze, unflinching. I try. Every day. I act with what little justice I can summon. I do not pretend to be a hero, but I am not a monster. Her hands clenched at her sides. His words were compelling, yet the memory of charred rooftops and smoke clawed at her heart. You speak of justice, yet destruction follows you like a shadow. Aldrin's jaw tightened. Perhaps. But I also sow hope. I rebuild. I defend those who cannot defend themselves. For a moment they simply stared at each other. King and commoner, survivor and ruler, justice and vengeance colliding in the quiet room. The line between villain and victim blurred, and Alara realized the man before her was both. His crown weighed him down, yet his heart still beat human and capable of change. She stepped back, letting silence answer for her. Inside, questions churned. Could she trust him? Could the man and the king coexist, or would one always destroy the other? The tension hung heavy, thick as the stone walls surrounding them. Yet somewhere beneath the anger and fear, a fragile curiosity lingered, whispering that perhaps the truth was more complicated than either of them imagined. The sun dipped low over the royal gardens, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed hedges. Alara knelt at the edge of a reflecting pool, carefully arranging lilies in a small vase she had brought from the village. Aldrin lingered nearby, silent, observing rather than intruding, though his presence was impossible to ignore. "You notice everything," she said without looking up, sensing him. "I do," he replied quietly. "And I notice how you coax life from even the smallest stems. Most people would overlook them." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps they are not worth noticing. Or perhaps most people cannot see beauty without a title attached." He knelt beside her, close enough that the warmth of his presence brushed against her arm. "Titles do not matter to me," he murmured. "Not here. Not with you." Alara's heart skipped, but she did not let it show. She returned to the lilies, arranging them with careful precision, each movement deliberate. "And yet, you are a king. Everything about you carries weight. Every gesture, every glance." Aldrin reached out, gently lifting a lily, letting it rest between his fingers. "Even a king can learn humility," he said softly. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "Even a king can learn to appreciate what he never had." For a heartbeat, the world fell away. The pool reflected the gold and crimson of the setting sun, their faces mirrored in the still water. A silence hung between them, electric and unspoken. She sensed him leaning closer, her breath catching. Then reality intruded. The weight of the castle, the council, the past pressed against her chest. She straightened abruptly. "I must finish these," she said, voice calm though her heart raced. He nodded, understanding but disappointed. "Soon," he said, the word a promise and a question all at once. Alara returned to her work, her hands shaking slightly. Every brush of his presence, every soft word, lingered in her mind like the fragrance of the lilies. She could not deny the pull, the curiosity, the dangerous warmth. Yet trust was a fragile thing, and she had no intention of surrendering it so easily. The garden, once a sanctuary of quiet labor, had become a stage for unspoken desire, restrained but palpable. A tension neither could yet act upon, yet neither could ignore. Alara paced the quiet corridors of the castle late at night, her mind a storm of grief, anger, and doubt. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows along the stone walls, mirroring the turmoil inside her. She had avoided him since the discovery of her village's destruction, but something tugged her forward. A need for answers, for the truth behind the man who had caused her so much pain. She entered the archives, a room heavy with dust and the scent of old parchment. Among the ledgers and correspondence, she found a small, sealed packet marked with the royal seal. Curiosity overpowered caution. She broke it open. Inside were letters, reports, and petitions, fragments of a hidden story. Soldiers had indeed moved on her village, but Aldrin's personal orders had been clear: protect the innocent. The letters revealed delays in the chain of command, sabotage by a jealous councilman who had manipulated orders for political gain. The king had tried to intervene to save lives, but his hands had been tied. Alara sank to the floor, the evidence trembling in her hands. Her chest tightened, not with anger, but with a reluctant understanding. The man she had hated so thoroughly was not entirely villain nor entirely savior, but trapped between duty and morality, as she might have been in her own limited sphere of influence. Footsteps echoed. She looked up to see Aldrin, his expression unreadable in the torchlight. "I thought you might find it," he said softly, stepping closer. His voice lacked authority tonight, only a tentative hope. "You tried to," her voice faltered. "You tried to save them?" He nodded, eyes heavy with the weight of regret. "I did what I could. I failed in many ways. But not for lack of care." Alara's fists unclenched. She swallowed, the mixture of grief, anger, and emerging understanding warring inside her. "I thought I hated you," she admitted, voice quiet, almost a whisper. "But perhaps you are as trapped by this throne as I am by my past." Aldrin knelt before her, the candlelight catching the sharp planes of his face softened by vulnerability. "I am," he said simply. And I am trying in every way I can to do right by those I rule, and by you." For the first time she saw him, not just the king, but the man behind the title. Their gazes met, and the tension between them shifted. Anger remained, yes, but now there was room for trust, for understanding, for the fragile beginnings of connection. The castle's cold stone walls could not contain the warmth spreading between them. For the first time, Alara allowed herself a cautious thought. Maybe he was not her enemy. The castle's garden was bathed in moonlight, silver and cold, yet alive with the scent of night-blooming flowers. Alara stood by the fountain, fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly, heart racing from the revelations of the past day. The torchlight of the castle flickered behind her, casting shadows that mirrored the conflict within. Aldrin approached silently, hands clasped behind his back, eyes searching hers. "Alara," he began, voice low, almost hesitant. "I cannot hold it in any longer." She looked up, wary. "Hold what in?" Her voice was soft, fragile, yet defensive. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I love you," he admitted, each word deliberate, heavy with truth. "Not as a king to a subject. Not as a man to a commoner. I love you for who you are. Your courage, your kindness, your fire. All of it." Alara's chest tightened. Every instinct told her to flee, to guard her heart against a love so dangerous, so impossible. Yet beneath that instinct, a spark had been growing, undeniable, persistent. She had seen his humanity, his struggle, his remorse. And she had felt herself pulled toward him, against reason, against caution. I feel the same," she whispered, voice breaking. Her hands trembled as she lowered them. "But there is something you must know." Aldrin's gaze sharpened, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" Her eyes fell to the fountain. "I am not only the daughter of a village. I am the daughter of a man who led a rebellion against your crown. My people, my father, they are enemies of the throne." The words hung in the air like frost, heavy and sharp. Aldrin's hand moved toward hers, but he paused, his expression a mixture of shock and sorrow. "You kept this from me? I tried to protect you. I tried to keep my heart in check, to honor what is right. But," she shook her head, tears threatening, "I cannot undo who I am, or what I am." He stepped closer, lifting her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "And yet I see you, not your father, not the past, not the crown. I see you, Alara. And I choose you despite all of it." Her breath hitched. For the first time, the world narrowed to the space between them, the pull of hearts that could not fully surrender, yet could not resist. Love and loyalty, duty and desire, clashed violently in the quiet of the moonlit garden, leaving them suspended on the edge of surrender and peril. The night held them, fragile and trembling, as truth and confession intertwined, binding their fates together in ways neither could yet comprehend. The council chamber was suffocating with tension, a cathedral of polished marble and whispered ambitions. The walls were lined with advisors, nobles, and ministers, each draped in velvet, their jeweled hands tapping impatiently. At the center stood King Aldrin, tall, composed, but radiating a quiet fire that none dared challenge. "Your Majesty," intoned Chancellor Varys, voice sharp as steel, "the Northern Alliance demands you marry Lady Seraphine. It is not merely tradition, it is necessity. The kingdom's stability depends upon it." Aldrin's gray eyes swept the room, sharp and unwavering. "And what of my heart, Chancellor?" he asked, voice calm yet slicing through the chamber like a blade. The nobles murmured. A few gasped. No king had ever dared defy the council so openly. "You cannot allow sentiment to dictate policy," Varys exclaimed. "I will not marry for politics alone," Aldrin said, stepping forward. The sound of his boots echoed, reverberating through the chamber. "I rule this kingdom with every ounce of my mind and every beat of my heart. But a throne without love is hollow. I will not hollow my life, or hers, by marrying a woman I do not love." A hush fell. Even the most seasoned courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. "And whom, then, does your Majesty choose?" demanded Lady Marielle, her tone silk laced with venom. Aldrin's gaze softened, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I choose Alara Winrose," he declared, voice carrying with absolute authority. "The woman who tends my gardens, my conscience, and now my heart. She is not a commoner to me. She is my equal, my truth, and my love." A gasp tore through the chamber. Some laughed in disbelief, some muttered threats, and a few bowed stiffly, conceding defeat. Alara, standing at the edge of the hall, felt the weight of every pair of eyes turned toward her. Aldrin extended a hand, steady and unwavering. "Alara, will you stand with me, not as subject to king, but as the woman I love?" Tears pricked her eyes, a mixture of relief, fear, and exhilaration. The danger had not vanished, the past still lingered, but the moment was theirs. She took his hand, her grip firm, her gaze resolute. "I will," she said, voice steady. The chamber erupted in whispers, shock, and grudging respect. Aldrin's defiance had reshaped the court, bending centuries of protocol to the force of human emotion. The king and the florist, once worlds apart, now stood together, heart and heart, defiance and devotion entwined. In that moment, the kingdom held its breath, and somewhere deep within the hall, even the most cynical observer could sense the undeniable truth. Love had conquered tradition, and the course of history would bend to their courage. The grand hall of Thornwall Castle gleamed with gold and crystal, every chandelier casting a glittering web of light over the polished marble floors. Nobles in velvet and silk murmured behind jeweled fans, their eyes flicking between the dais and the assembled crowd. Outside, the banners of the kingdom waved in the late afternoon breeze, heralding a day that would be remembered for generations. At the center of the hall, King Aldrin stood tall, regal and commanding, yet his gaze was fixed on the woman at the edge of the dais, Elara Winrose, heart pounding beneath the weight of silk and nerves. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the folds of her gown, every instinct torn between pride, fear, and desire. "Elara," Aldrin's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "You have stood beside me in quiet gardens and in the shadows of my duties. You have seen my failures, my burdens, and yet you remain." Her breath caught. The hall seemed to shrink around her, every whisper fading as if the world had narrowed to the space between them. "I ask you now," he continued, kneeling slightly in a gesture that transcended protocol, "to stand not only as my equal, but as my partner, my heart, my life. Will you marry me?" Gasps echoed through the hall. Elara's eyes blurred with emotion. Her mind raced, memories of her destroyed village, the weight of her father's rebellion, the danger still lingering in the shadows of court politics. Yet beneath it all, the pull of her feelings for him, the undeniable truth of their bond, burned hotter than fear. She stepped forward, every heartbeat thunderous in her chest. The whispers of nobles collided with the rapid drum of her pulse. "Aldrin," she began, voice quivering, I cannot promise life without risk, without shadows from the past. But her gaze met his, steadying herself in the sincerity of his eyes. "I choose you. With all my heart, I choose you." A hush fell, then a collective sigh, a ripple of awe and surprise moving through the assembled court. Aldrin rose, taking her hands in his, lifting her chin, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. The king and the florist, the ruler and the survivor, stood together at last, their bond cemented in public defiance and private devotion. Passion, fear, and hope mingled in Elara's chest, a storm finally finding its anchor. Around them, the court watched history being rewritten, not by politics or war, but by courage, love, and the audacity to defy expectation. In that brilliant hall, hearts and titles collided, and for the first time, the kingdom seemed to breathe in unison with their union. The grand hall, now silent after Aldrin's declaration, seemed to hold its breath. Torches flickered along the walls, casting shadows that danced across the marble floor. Elara stood frozen, heart pounding so fiercely it threatened to shatter her composure. She could see the hope and love reflected in Aldrin's eyes, feel the warmth of his hand reaching for hers, but the weight of truth pressed heavily on her chest. Aldrin stepped closer, voice low and tender. "Elara, you are trembling. Speak to me." She drew in a shaky breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Aldrin, I cannot," she said, words breaking over the polished stones. "I cannot accept your love, not now, not like this." His brow furrowed. "Why?" "After all we have shared, after all we have discovered." Her lips trembled. "Because if the council, or anyone learned who I truly am, the daughter of a rebel, the heir to a cause that fought your crown, you would be accused of treason. And nothing I could do would save you from their wrath." Aldrin's hand faltered mid-reach. Silence stretched like a blade between them. "You speak of danger, yet I would face it for you. Do you not trust me?" Elara's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head slowly. "I trust you with my heart, but not with your life. I cannot bear the thought of you condemned because of me. I love you too fiercely to let that happen." His jaw tightened. "And you believe rejection is protection?" "Yes," she whispered, voice raw. "If I refuse you, if I hide my truth, the council will never question you. You will remain safe. And one day, perhaps we can find a way, together, when the world allows it." Aldrin's eyes softened, clouded with grief, but he could not argue. He saw the sacrifice etched into every line of her face, the bravery that transcended fear. The warmth between them remained unbroken, yet painfully restrained. She stepped back, releasing his hand, a shiver of loss and longing rippling through her. Around them, the court remained oblivious, unaware of the quiet devastation unfolding in the center of the hall. Alara's chest ached, her love for him burning hotter because it could not be claimed. She had chosen duty over desire, sacrifice over passion, and in doing so, had proven the depth of her courage, not only for herself but for the man she could not let fall. Aldrin watched her retreat, his heart heavy but understanding the quiet heroism in her choice. The crown and the heart were bound, yet this night had proven. Some sacrifices, however painful, were made in the name of love itself. The council chamber buzzed with tense whispers, nobles and advisors gathered in ornate robes, eyes fixed on King Aldrin, who stood tall at the dais. Alara's presence was cautious, hidden slightly behind the golden pillars, her heart pounding as the moment of reckoning arrived. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Varys began, voice measured but sharp, "the council expects you to explain your decision. Marrying Miss Winrose defies tradition and threatens political alliances. How do you justify?" Aldrin raised a hand, silencing the chamber instantly. His gray eyes, steady and commanding, swept over the gathered nobles. "Enough!" The hall fell into heavy silence. "I justify my decision not by tradition, not by fear, nor by the whispers of those who would see duty over love," he declared, voice resonant and unwavering. "I marry Alara Winrose because she is worthy, not only of my heart, but of my respect, my trust, and the future of this kingdom. Her courage, wisdom, and integrity surpass any title or lineage." A murmur rippled through the council, shock and disbelief clashing with grudging admiration. Alara stepped forward, heart pounding, trembling with relief and fear. Aldrin's gaze found hers, steady and warm. "She is no enemy. She is no commoner. She is my equal, and I will defend her, publicly and without compromise." Chancellor Varys opened his mouth, but Aldrin's next words left no room for argument. "Anyone who questions this union questions the judgment of their king. I will not tolerate it. Miss Winrose stands beside me, and together, we will face whatever challenges may come. And if that threatens old customs, so be it. The kingdom will endure, and so will justice." The hall stilled. Nobles shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the king's will was absolute and his heart irrevocably set. Some bowed stiffly, others clenched fists, but none dared defy him openly. Alara exhaled, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time, the weight of fear and secrecy lifted. Aldrin stepped forward, offering his hand with a quiet, unyielding certainty. She took it, and together they stood at the center of the chamber, a living testament to courage, love, and truth. In that moment, the kingdom saw not just a king and a florist, but the undeniable power of choice, the triumph of honesty, and the unbreakable bond of two hearts willing to defy the world for each other. The council's whispers faded into silence, replaced by a new reverence, for love, for integrity, and for the man and woman who had chosen each other against all odds. The sun rose over Thornwall Castle, painting the towers in shades of gold and amber. The courtyard was alive with activity, servants, nobles, and villagers moving with purpose. But at the center, a quieter reunion unfolded. Aldrin stood tall, his hand resting lightly on Alara's. Before them, a man stepped forward, older now, yet unmistakably Alara's father, the once feared rebel leader. His eyes were wary but softened as they met Aldrin's steady gaze. "King Aldrin," he said cautiously, bowing slightly, "I did not expect to meet you under these circumstances." Aldrin inclined his head. "And I did not expect to meet the man who shaped the woman I love. Your past and hers need not define our future." Alara's father studied them, then slowly nodded. "Perhaps it is time to lay old grievances to rest. For her sake, and for the kingdom." Alara exhaled, a weight she hadn't fully realized pressing on her chest. Tears pricked her eyes. "Father," she whispered, stepping closer, bridging the years of fear and separation. Aldrin watched the reunion quietly, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "The past cannot be changed," he said gently, "but it can be reconciled. Fear no longer rules us. Love can guide us instead." Alara turned to him, heart swelling with emotion. The anger, the grief, the hesitation, all melted under the warmth of his gaze. I accept you fully," she said, her voice steady now, filled with a quiet certainty. He pulled her gently into his arms, and for a moment, the bustle of the castle faded. There was only the echo of hearts beating together, of trust restored, and of a love that had survived fear, loss, and political intrigue. Her father approached, placing a hand on both of their shoulders. "May this union bring peace to the kingdom, and to all who live within it," he said solemnly. Alara and Aldrin shared a glance, a mix of laughter and tears, relief and joy. The court, the kingdom, the past, they were no longer chains but steps toward a future they would face together. The sun climbed higher, casting light on a world forever changed. Love had triumphed over politics, fear had yielded to courage, and two hearts had found their home, not just in each other, but in the promise of a shared life, honest, unafraid, and unbound. End.